There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. I am
Dr. Maya Angelou. Out of a youth marked by pain and injustice, Dr. Maya Angelou rose with an unbending determination to fight for civil rights and inspire every one of us to recognize and embrace the possibility and potential we each hold. With her soaring poetry, towering prose, and mastery of a range of art forms, Dr. Angelou has spoken to the conscience of our nation. Her soul-stirring words have taught us how to reach across division and honor the beauty of our world.
Born as Marguerite Annie Johnson in St. Louis, Missouri on April 4, 1928. At the age of 3, her parents separated and sent her to live with her grandmother in Arkansas. She told NPR, "They put me and my brother on a train without any companionship, without any adults, and put tags on our arms and said, 'This child should be delivered to Miss Annie Henderson in Stamps, Arkansas.'" Angelou credits her grandmother for raising her, but when she was just 7 years old, things took a tragic turn. During a trip to St. Louis to visit her mother, she was sexually assaulted by her mother's boyfriend. She told her brother, who told her family, and they had the man arrested. However, he got off with just a single day in jail. Someone took the law into their own hands and beat him to death in retaliation. Terrified by the power of her own voice, despite the circumstances, Maya stopped speaking entirely. She was convinced that saying the man's name had led to his death. She believed her voice to be a killing machine.
I was 7.5, and my 7.5-year-old logic deduced that my voice had killed him. So I stopped speaking.
She became mute and did not speak a word for 5 years, and instead she turned to reading and literature and memorizing all the poetry she could find. Langston Hughes, William Shakespeare, and Charles Dickens were among the great authors. She told the Smithsonian, "I believe that my brain reconstructed itself during those years. I believe that the areas in the brain which provide and promote physical speech had nothing to do, and so I've been able to develop a memory quite unusual, which has allowed me to learn languages, really quite a few." In middle school, a teacher named Mrs. Flowers encouraged her love of poetry and stressed the importance of speaking for herself, and Maya left her silence behind and rose to the top of her 8th grade class. When Maya and her brother became teenagers, their grandmother felt it was too dangerous to live in the South, so she sent them to live with their mother in California. Maya studied acting and dance. At 16 years old, she decided she wanted to be a streetcar conductor simply because she liked the uniforms, but was denied an application because of her race. With her mother's support, Maya sat in the lobby of the office from open to close every day for 2 weeks until she wore down their discrimination. She became the first female African-American streetcar conductor in San Francisco. She also became pregnant and had her one and only child, Guy Johnson, in 1945. Aside from waitressing and retail jobs, Maya became a prostitute and eventually ran a brothel to support herself and her son. Even though the experience was not something she was proud of, she was also not ashamed to speak and write about it, recounting the whole experience in the 1974 memoir, Gathered Together in My Name. She told NPR, "Children need to know they can stumble and fumble and fall. See where you are and get up. Forgive yourself and go on about the business of living your life." In the 1950s, Maya started to focus on her dance career and started to perform in clubs around San Francisco. She was a star destined to make the world her stage. In 1951, Maya married her first husband, Tosh Angelou, a Greek sailor. She retained her married surname even after they eventually divorced 3 years later. However, she changed Angelou to Angelou to make it her own, combining her childhood nickname with the last name of her husband. Throughout the 50s, her career took off. Maya was a calypso dancer in nightclubs in Chicago, New York, and San Francisco, which inspired her first and last studio album, Miss Calypso, which was released in 1957.
With Miss Calypso herself, Maya Angelou.
Cops grabbed Mo, and as Joe ran out, Brother Mo, he began to shout, "Run, Joe! Hey, the man's at the door, run, Joe! The man, he won't let me go, run, Joe! Run, Joe, as fast as you can, run, Joe! These police holding me high."
She also spent a year touring Europe, Israel, and Egypt as a cast member of the U.S. State Department production of Porgy and Bess. She taught modern dance classes along the way. Shortly after, in 1959, she moved to New York City and joined the Harlem Writers Guild and began publishing the first pieces of writing. During the 60s, Maya Angelou was very invested in the civil rights movement. She met Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and began using her remarkable writing talents to raise funds for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Angelou also began a relationship with a South African freedom fighter. Along with Angelou's son, the couple moved to Cairo, Egypt to continue the fight against segregation on grounds other than race. But after the relationship ended in 1962, Angelou decided to move to Ghana with her son, who planned to attend college. Angelou would continue fighting for civil rights even while living abroad, immersing herself in the African American expatriate community there. During King's historic March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, in 1963, she still participated in marching outside the American Embassy in the capital of Ghana in solidarity. She also became close with activists and literacy icons like W.E.B. Du Bois, Julia Mayfield, and James Baldwin, who weren't afraid to speak on the inequalities of the Black experience in America. It was also during her time in Ghana that she became close with another expatriate living there, civil rights leader Malcolm X. In 1965, Angelou returned to America to help Malcolm X create his new organization of African American Unity. Shortly after returning to the United States, Angelou was devastated when Malcolm X was assassinated. She briefly moved to Hawaii, then to Los Angeles, where she witnessed the Watts riots. Finally, she returned to New York, where she poured her restlessness into her writing. In 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. approached Angelou and asked her to organize a new march. She agreed, but before the march could happen, King was assassinated on Angelou's 40th birthday. For many years after, she refused to celebrate her birthday. Instead, she would visit King's widow, Coretta Scott King, on the anniversary of his death. That year, she also wrote, produced, and narrated the groundbreaking 10-part documentary series, Blacks, Blues, Black. That was about the connection between blues music and Africa. Inspired by her work and her incredible life, writer James Baldwin and editor Robert Limitz began encouraging and then challenging her to write an autobiography. Initially, she was hesitant, but in 1969, Maya Angelou published her first autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Maya's work became an instrumental tool in schools because of its poetic and innovative narrative structure. A decade later, the book was adapted into a TV movie for CBS. While she may be known best as a poet and influential memoirist, she also had a groundbreaking career in film and TV. In March of 1972, the original screenplay, Georgia, Georgia, became the first screenplay written by an African-American woman to be produced as a movie. She briefly returned to the stage in 1973 for the Broadway play Look Away, which earned her a Tony Award nomination. In the 1977 miniseries Roots, Maya played Kunta Kinte's grandmother. The matriarch from which this dramatization of Alex Haley's family history from the slave trade to emancipation stems. 2 years later, she adopted her famous autobiography, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, into a television movie. Her next role came in June of 1993 in Poetic Justice, starring Janet Jackson and Tupac Shakur. Maya also penned the verses that made justice poetic. Some of her later appearances in front of the camera include Moesha, Sesame Street, and Medea's Family Reunion. Maya Angelou's directorial debut in the Delta premiered in 1998. She became one of the first African-American women to join the Directors Guild of America. Maya published 7 autobiographies in total, each spanning distinct chapters of her life. She published the final volume in 2013 at the age of 85. In 2010, Angelou donated her personal papers and memorabilia to the New York Public Library Schoenberg Center for Research in Black Culture in Harlem, saying, I've always wanted my papers to be in the Schoenberg. It's a magnificent depository of all the information about the African American experience. I am grateful that it exists so that all the children, Black and white, Asian and Spanish speaking, Native Americans, and Aleutians can know there is a place where they can go to find the truth of the people's history. On May 28, 2014, Maya Angelou passed away in her home in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. But her breathtaking poetry that has earned her global respect and faith from President Bill Clinton's inauguration to the 1995 Million Man March in Washington. Her words were often called upon to touch and inspire millions, but her legacy continues to inspire millions through her incredible bodies of work and a life of triumphing over tragedy.
Imagine. And I've had so many rainbows in my clouds. I had a lot of clouds. But I have had so many rainbows. And one of the things I do when I step up on a stage, when I stand up to translate, when I go to teach my classes, when I go to direct a movie, I bring everyone who has ever been kind to me with me. Black, white, Asian, Spanish-speaking, Native American, gay, straight, everybody. I say, come with me. I'm going on the stage. Come with me, I need you now. Long dead, you see? So I don't ever feel I have no help. I've had rainbows in my clouds. And the thing to do, it seems to me, is to prepare yourself so that you can be a rainbow in somebody else's cloud. Somebody who may not look like you, may not call God the same name you call God, if they call God at all. You see? And may not eat the same dishes prepared the way you do, may not dance your dances or speak your language, but be a blessing to somebody. That's what I think.
There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. I am Maya Angelou.